The banquet hall was one of those places that made ordinary people feel small. The ceiling was high and decorated with golden light. Long tables were covered with white cloth, polished silverware, and tall candles that flickered gently. Men in military dress uniforms walked around shaking hands. Women in elegant clothes laughed at the right moments. Everyone in that room seemed to belong there, everyone except Maya Chen. Maya sat at the far end of the last table, close to the wall, in a simple navy blue dress she had worn to a colleague's wedding 2 years ago. She had not planned to come tonight. Her co-worker, the one who had actually been invited, had called her that afternoon and said she had a fever. She asked Maya to take her seat so the table would not be empty. Maya almost said no. She wished now that she had. The man sitting to her left had turned his chair slightly away after their first exchange of words. He had asked her what she did. She said she was a nurse. He nodded once, the kind of nod that really means nothing, and then turned to the person on his other side and did not look back. The woman to her right was dressed in a bright red outfit and was very interested in everyone except Maya. She had leaned over once, looked at Maya's simple dress, and asked if she was one of the assistants for the evening. Maya had smiled and said no. She picked up her glass of water and watched the room. She was good at watching. She had learned it in a place very different from this one. A place where watching carefully could mean the difference between life and something much worse. A large screen at the front of the hall showed photographs of soldiers. Some were in the field, sitting beside military vehicles. Some were at ceremonies, holding folded flags. The event was called the Annual Military Appreciation Gala, and it was organized every year to honor soldiers who had served with distinction. The speeches were long. The applause was polite. The food was served in small portions that looked beautiful and tasted like very little. Maya ate quietly. She watched the clock. She thought about her shift the next morning, a 12-hour stretch in the trauma unit at the hospital near Fort Bragg. She thought about the young soldier she had treated 3 days ago, the one who had refused to cry even though his injury was serious, and how she had sat beside him after her shift was over and simply kept him company because no one else had come. She was thinking about him when she heard her name. At first, she thought she had imagined it. Names that sound like yours have a way of catching your attention in crowded rooms. But then she heard it again, clearly, firmly, spoken into a microphone by a voice that carried the kind of calm authority that comes from years of real responsibility. She looked toward the front of the room. A group of 8 men had stood up from a table near the center of the hall. They were all in military dress uniforms, and several of them had visible marks of what their service had cost them. One man walked with a cane. Another had a scar along the side of his jaw that no amount of time would ever fully erase. These were Green Berets, soldiers from one of the most respected Special Forces units in the United States Army. They had been honored earlier in the evening for a unit citation, a formal recognition of something extraordinary they had done together. The man holding the microphone was tall, with broad shoulders and a face that looked like it had seen a great deal, and chosen peace anyway. His name was Master Sergeant Daniel Reyes, and he had taken the microphone without asking anyone's permission. The MC at the podium looked uncertain for a moment, then stepped aside. You did not argue with a look like the one Daniel Reyes carried. The room went quiet, not the polite quiet of people waiting for the next scheduled item, the deep quiet of people who sense that something real is about to happen. Daniel Reyes spoke slowly. He said that his team had received a citation tonight. He said that citation had 7 names on it. He said there was a name missing, a name that should have been the first one on that list. Then he said it out loud, into the microphone, in a room full of generals and politicians, and people who had spent the entire evening looking past her. Maya Chen. She stopped breathing for a moment. He turned, and all 8 men turned with him, and they faced her corner of the room. Some people in the crowd craned their necks, looking confused. The woman in red turned and stared at Maya with wide eyes. The man who had turned his chair away slowly turned it back. Daniel Reyes did not rush. He looked directly at Maya and spoke as if every word cost something, and he was willing to pay it. He said that there were men standing at that table who were breathing tonight because of the woman in the navy blue dress, sitting alone in the corner. He said it was not luck. He said it was not protocol. He said it was because she had decided, every single time, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return, that no one was going to be lost if she could help it. And then he told the room who Maya Chen really was. What the room did not know, what almost no one knew, was that Maya had spent 3 consecutive overseas deployments working as a trauma nurse, embedded with special forces teams. She was not a soldier, she had no rank, no weapon, and no official protection. She was a civilian nurse, working under a contractor program, and she had volunteered for it 3 times, because she believed that where the need was greatest, that was where she needed to be. In the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, in the winter of 2019, she had worked for 4 hours straight in a small, cold room, lit only by a headlamp, to save 2 soldiers from a single operation that had gone wrong. One had a serious chest injury, the other was in shock from blood loss. There was no surgical equipment. There was no backup. There was only Maya, and what she knew, and what her hands could do. Both men lived. The team started calling her the woman who argues with death and wins. She had told them to stop being dramatic. She had then gone back to checking supply inventories, as if nothing unusual had happened. During a convoy that was caught in an unexpected attack, the team's own medic was among those who were injured. Maya stepped in without being asked. She triaged 4 soldiers at the same time, speaking in a steady voice to 2 untrained men, guiding their hands, telling them exactly where to press, and how hard, and when to hold, and when to release. She did all of this while she herself had shrapnel in her arm from the initial blast. No one knew she was injured until the last soldier was stabilized, and someone noticed the blood soaking through her sleeve. She had not mentioned it. She had not thought it was the important thing at the time. But perhaps the story that the room remembered most was the one about the young interpreter. He was 19 years old. He had been working with the team as a local translator, and he had been caught in crossfire during a mission that had not gone as planned. He was not American. He was not the primary mission. 3 separate people told Maya to leave him and focus on the soldiers. She had looked at each of those 3 people with the same calm expression, and then turned back to the young man on the ground and continued working on him. For 40 minutes, while soldiers provided security around her, she worked. The boy survived. What Maya did not know until years later, what Daniel Reyes told the room that night, was that this same young interpreter had eventually made his way to the United States. He had gotten an education. He had provided information, during his remaining time with the team, that had directly protected 11 American lives. He was alive because Maya had refused to leave him. And because he was alive, others were too. The room was completely silent. Then one soldier began to applaud, and then all 8 of them were standing, those who could stand, and they were clapping for the woman in the corner, who had spent the whole evening being overlooked. And then the room followed, not the rehearsed applause of a formal ceremony. Something more than that, something that came up from the floor of the room and filled the high ceiling and had nowhere else to go. Maya Chen did not give a speech. She was not that kind of person. She stood slowly, the way you stand when you are not entirely sure the moment is real. She looked at the 8 men in the center of the room, men with scars, men with canes, men who had seen the worst the world had to offer, and had come home and dressed up and come to a banquet and stood up for her. And she nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it said everything she could not put into words. The woman in red did not say anything for a very long time. In the days after the banquet, a journalist from a regional publication reached out to Maya and asked if she would be willing to share a little about her experience. She agreed to speak for 30 minutes. She ended up speaking for 15. She was not comfortable with the attention, but she understood that sometimes a story is not only yours to keep. She spoke about the work the way a carpenter might speak about a good joint, practically, with respect for what the task required. She said that in the middle of a crisis, you do not think about danger, you think about the next 30 seconds. You think about what the person in front of you needs right now, in this moment, and you give it everything you have. She said the hardest part was never the injury itself. The hardest part was the moment just before, when you looked at someone and saw them looking back at you, and you understood that they had decided to trust you completely. She spoke about the young interpreter. She said she thought about him from time to time. She had learned, through a mutual contact, that he was studying engineering at a university in Ohio. She had never reached out to him. She did not feel the need to. She said that knowing he was well was already the whole of it. The journalist asked her if it ever hurt. The years of quiet, the invisible work. The way an entire banquet hall full of people had looked past her for most of an evening. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said something very simple. She said the men came home. She said that was not a small thing. She said that was in fact everything. That night, back in her apartment near Fort Bragg, Maya Chen made herself a plain dinner and washed the dishes and set her alarm for 5 in the morning. She had a shift at 6. There was a patient she wanted to check on before the day got busy, a young soldier who had come in 2 days ago and who still did not have any family visiting. Before she went to sleep, she opened the drawer of her bedside table. Inside, among a few other small items, was a photograph. It had arrived in the mail several months after her last deployment, with no note, no return address, just the photo, and an envelope with a military postmark. In the photograph, 8 men stood together, with their arms around each other's shoulders. They were smiling. They were all there, every single one of them. She looked at it for a moment, the way you look at something you have looked at many times before. Then she closed the drawer, turned off the light, and went to sleep. She had an early morning,